Leaders in tech are burning out at an absurd rate. Ctrl+Alt+Delete with Lisa Duerre is a no BS conversation with one of the top female executives who spent over 25 years in Silicon Valley. If you're suffering from the always-on, never good enough, will replace you today machine called the tech space, this show's for you. Here's Lisa.
Everybody, do I have a treat for you today? Oh my God, I'm giddy. Like, I don't know. Well, you guys know who I am. You know how I show up. But, when you think about what's going on in the world right now, and you think about the companies and the organizations that you're leading, as well as the teams that are, going through everything with you right now, what I know to be true is more conversations need to be had. And people are super busy. And everybody's thinking, oh, you can read my mind and, we'll get to that later. Let's just get the work done and, move on. But we are in a massive state of change and transition right now. And I don't know anybody better than to have with us today than Sarah Noll Wilson. Sarah, I'm so excited you're here. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I've been stalking Sarah on LinkedIn. This is the truth. And I love what she stands for. I love how she shows up. I love, her messages. And listen, Sarah's all about improving relationships, one conversation at a time. So I'm going to read you her official bio, right? But the reason we're here today is whether you're leading your company, leading your team, or leading yourself, you want to lean into this conversation that we're about to have, because we're going to give you tips, stories. We're going to share real world experience on how you can bring impactful conversations forward. You can be brave and scared, right? You can do what's right for yourself and for the organization. And we're going to give you some really great insight into how to do that for yourselves today. So let me tell you why I invited Sarah after stalking her and reaching out on LinkedIn, which I just love a platform that you can just compliment someone on their work, tell them how awesome they are, and then all of a sudden you invite them to your podcast. Like, it's just, I love it.
I mean, flattery goes a long way. Let's see,
right? Yeah. Yes. Well, listen, I am a big fan, so I'm thrilled you're here. So Sarah Noll Wilson is a researcher and a transformer of teams. Sarah and her colleagues are on a mission to help leaders understand and honor the complexity of the humans they serve. And I say honor because we need this right now. I'm so glad you're here. Sarah and her team work closely with leaders to help them build and rebuild their relationships one conversation at a time. I mean, we are in a year of remote everything, and conversations are the glue that hold teams together, and they're the ways to get the information you need to be successful. I mean, it's everything. So everybody lean on in. And Sarah, thank you for giving us your time today. I'm really glad you're here.
I am so excited. And that was such a lovely introduction. And, and your point about, just that, like, more conversations need to happen. It's interesting in this remote time that people feel like, oh, well, it's just, we used to be so good at building relationships before. And now we just aren't. And I would challenge that. I go, I don't think you were good at it before. I think you just had more opportunities for it to happen, right? Like, I actually don't think you were good at it. I think you just had quantity of opportunities. And so you could, your batting average was a little higher. But this is an opportunity for us to build that intentional muscle.
Oh my gosh. Amen to that. And when I think about some of the executives I'm coaching right now, they're starting jobs at new companies virtually. And they're really like, how in the hell do I build a relationship? How do I have these conversations? What do I do? And you would think, like, to your point, like, well, I'm good at this already. Well, yeah. I totally agree with what you're saying. And I know this to be true for myself as well. I've had to build a new muscle, even just being virtual with everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Reading the body language, making sure that we have the time. And I'm also asking people to not be on Zoom so much, to actually go back to the phone and take a walk.
Yeah.
I think you can have a deeper conversation than you're focused on, okay, as a woman, is my bra strap showing, or the man, can they see I'm in my workout shorts? You're so focused on this instead of just being in the conversation. So what are you seeing these days? Like, what's really going on in the world, and what's the big issue that leaders that you're working with are facing right now?
That's a really loaded question.
I know, right?
It depends. This is why you're good at what you do. I think a couple of things, right? It depends on where people fall and what they want the future of their company. So companies that are committed to, we're an in-person company, are really struggling with, what does that look like when the momentum is clearly not on their side, when the their competitors are doing it differently. And I think there's a big conflict that's happening, the attention, I should say, that's happening in that camp. I think then you have leaders who are wanting to do this, but they're just trying to figure out like, how the heck do we do this better? How do we, like, how do we bring people into our company when we're never going to meet them for some length of time? And I think overarching, right, like the biggest issue just globally is the fact that we've been under a chronic level of stress. We've been experiencing global trauma. And I don't think that has been addressed as effectively as it needs to in the workplace, or that we're prepared to address what it's going to look like down the road. So this topic of burnout and stress and navigating that it was always important before. I think that's the thing. It's like, yeah, we're in a really heightened time, but the reality is we just tolerated it before. It just became part of the like, yep, that's just the work is hard, and or whatever the case is, a badge of honor, like we were talking about beforehand. So there's the navigating, navigating the transition and like figuring out, well, who are we now is I feel like the big question that people are either directly asking or they're unconsciously struggling with and trying to figure out what the path forward is.
Yeah, I'm seeing very similar, honestly, the same. And what I'm noticing in the conversations about burnout is we're finally at a point where people are actually saying, I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
I'm burning out. There's like way more conversations about mental health. I mean, I have people talking about anxiety now. I mean, they never used to talk about that. And the anxiety of all of this unknown and this change has been off the charts. And what I love about the work that you do and how you show up in the platforms that I see you on is you break it down into, the smaller pieces so that people can actually have that one conversation at a time. So maybe what might be useful is you basically gave 3 scenarios, right? So there's the overarching scenario of the companies that want to stay in person. And then the momentum, I heard you say, that's almost against them now, right? And then I heard you talk about trying to navigate this global trauma, right? And I'll add the word grief. There's been so much loss.
Yes.
I had a woman yesterday in my clubhouse room talking about she lost 5 people in 6 months and she's going for an advanced certification and she can't study. What does she do? And I'm like, time out. Let's get really clear, right? What really matters. So there's this grief and trauma piece going on. And then I think also there are plenty of leaders who want to change the rules and they don't know how to even have the conversation to influence up, around, and through. And yet they probably, I'm not going to say probably, many of them have expressed to me, I don't want to go back to the office. So, I mean, we could unpack this in so many different ways, but of those 3, what resonates with you right now and what's just showing up and, the divine download of insight and guidance that you could share with people?
Divine download. I love your language.
Oh, thank you.
I would love to give a little space to the navigating trauma and grief.
Okay, let's go.
And I think it's connected to, you mentioned rules, and I'll share for people who are listening is that, one of the most important things I think we should be doing as people and as people who are in positions of authority, leaders, quote unquote, formal leaders, right? Is really always examining what are things we've decided are rules and what are things that are just possibilities. When we talk about like, how do we build a workplace for humans? I mean, let's focus on grief for a second. I mean, there has been loss of life, like you were talking about. I mean, in a month, we lost 2 family members and we haven't been able to get together with our family, right? Because of the situation. And so grief is always a tenuous process that shows up whenever, but there is a lot of grieving of our team members and potentially ourselves that's basically being put on hold. And so one of the things that I would love for companies to think about and challenge is their bereavement policies. Our bereavement policies really are set up to dictate who can you mourn, how long can you mourn for, and when are you allowed to take that time off. And so like, that's a rule that I would love to see people challenge to go, well, what does bereavement look like when we can't get together for a celebration of life until a year later? What does bereavement look like when we can't, start working on clearing out someone's house until a year later or 6 months later or whatever the case is? Because our current policies that companies tend to, like the typical ones, are quite limiting to what I mean, they were always limiting, but like, we really have to be prepared for the fact that, you know, the trauma we're experiencing because of the collective loss, because of the collective stress, because of navigating the complexity and the uncertainty for such a long period of time. You know, PTSD doesn't show up immediately afterwards, and it doesn't always seem obvious how it will show up, but it will. And if as companies we're not prepared for that, we're going to be navigating a lot of challenges that we don't realize are actually coming from this time.
I'm taking it all in. The first thing I want to say is this is such a great example. So you started with loss, and then you gave a lot of ideas about bereavement, right? And so many times at work, people skip that part because it's like, oh, she kept going. So I don't want to keep going. I want to really model what I believe is the right thing to do whenever someone experiences loss, having been there myself, is to say, you know, I don't want to say I'm sorry for your loss, because I don't like that phrase personally. It drives me bonkers. But I'm witnessing, and I want to, you know, put space for just a moment to look you in the eye and say, you know, I'm really sorry that happened, and that you're having to navigate that. And, you know, I'm going to say this to you. I'm not modeling this for anybody. I'm saying it just to you because this is how I feel. If you ever need an ear or a friend, I want to offer that to you. Like, having experienced loss myself. I really mean that. And I don't know how this will even play out in someone listening if we like practice this, because I didn't know this happened. It's happening a lot to people. And, you know, it happened to me on Clubhouse yesterday. There was a woman expressing she had lost 5 people in 6 months. And in the Clubhouse room, we were talking about burnout. I just had to pause and just really lean into that too, because I think that is a very, we need love. We all need love. And when you're grieving, love is part of the answer, right? So do you have a phrase that you'd want to hear? Because I don't really know what the phrase is. I just know I kind of fumble over it, but I still hold the space. So do you have any guidance on that? If someone at work says I lost somebody, like what could someone say?
You know, I appreciate you calling out the, like, I'm sorry for your loss, because it's not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes we get into defaults and we get into autopilot, right? Yep. That's really hard.
It's really hard. Yeah.
You know, or, you know, my colleague, Teresa, a phrase that I've adopted from her is, wow, that's really heavy. That's a lot right now.
Oh,
right.
I love that.
And to sit with that. And I think that one of the things when we talk about having conversations that maybe come from a place of like emotionally charged, or where people are experiencing loss, and it could be loss of life, it could be loss of time, right? You know, we have, my mother-in-law's, you know, has leukemia, and we feel like we lost a year with her, right? And so so sometimes what can happen when somebody shows up in a way that's very vulnerable, emotionally expressive, is that we feel like it's our job to take care of and remove the pain. And the reality is that that's not your job. And sometimes I think we we want to remove the discomfort or pain because it's making us uncomfortable, right? So let's get really specific, because I know that people listening, if you're like me, I'm always like, theory's great, tools are better.
Totally. You know,
One thing, you know, something that has come up a few times is I'll have, you know, people in audience or leaders will ask, and lovingly ask, and usually men, right, will say, I don't know how to show up when somebody cries. Like, I don't know what to do with tears. And, you know, in true story, I was at a training once where there was an HR person who prided herself on, we're a no tissue zone.
Wow.
And it was like, that would be horrible to work for you. Because guess what? Let's talk about tears for a second. Tears are not a sign of weakness. Tears are a biological emotion, like it's a biological response. You know, and sometimes I'll hear people say, yeah, but Sarah, but what about people who use tears to get out of things? Like, okay, let's just, I'm a classically trained actor, right? Like, I'm a trained actor. I can cry on cue.
Really?
Right? I spent a lot of years like working on that skill. Most people are not developing that skill. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't be a stress response or a mechanism that they've just like learned, but most people, adults, aren't going, what can I do to cue the tears so I can get out of this? But I mean, it can come from a defensive mechanism, certainly, but most of the time not. So So a couple of things is, you know, one, to get curious about what is it about the tears that make me uncomfortable, right? Because what happens is we reach for the tissues, we give it over to you and say, like, kind of like, fix yourself up.
Yeah.
I'll give you a moment to clean yourself up.
Exactly.
Because let's be really clear. I want you to clean yourself up because you are making me comfortable. Your emotions are making me uncomfortable.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
And so for me, I have some philosophies around tears. Tears show up when something's important.
Mm-hmm.
And they come when there's a release, there's a buildup, you know, could be hormones, but there's a release and a buildup. And my favorite question to ask is, first, I just let people know tears are normal, they're healthy, and they're here because something's important.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second question is, what are the tears telling us?
Oh, I love that. What are the tears telling us?
And it's amazing what opens up. So don't reach for the tissues. Let them know, hey, you know what? This what you're experiencing is safe with me.
Yeah. Oh, this is so, I had no idea we were going down this path. Do you know what I mean? This is why I love organic podcasting. This is exactly what's supposed to be talked about right now.
Yeah.
So
what's coming up for you, because you're having a reaction.
I'm having a moment. Yeah. So I'll share it. But what I appreciate about what you just said is, first of all, tears are normal. I've cried tears of joy.
Yeah.
Right. I had someone at work one time, I kicked ass on a project. I led this huge team. It was like a $10 million project. And that my sponsor cried. And it was a man, right? And he was like, don't tell anybody I cried. But he was hugging me and telling me, I'm so proud of you. This, I knew you could do it, blah, blah. And crying. And like, that meant everything to me. And I wasn't like, here's your tissue, go fix your face. I was like, bring it on, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Like, this is the greatest acknowledgement you can give me.
Yes. Right. But he was very much like, oh God, don't ever tell anybody, blah, blah, blah. But I was always, from that moment on, I had a different place in my heart for him. Right. And that was a man crying at work. Now, I've cried at work and been very embarrassed. And that was usually because I was so tired. I didn't have the wherewithal for composure. And I was so on the verge of burnout. My defenses were down. Right.
Yeah.
I cried one time with a coach and I said, oh my God, we got to fix my makeup before I go back out. And she says, honey, men aren't even looking at your makeup. Don't worry about it. Like, she just brushed it off. Like, they're not even paying attention to you. And I thought, why am I worried about all this so much? So there's all that. And then what was showing up for me when you were talking is I had a miscarriage and I had a male boss and he was remote always. And when this happened, I had infertility for a long time. And so I hadn't told anybody I was pregnant because I was scared. And then the miscarriage happened and I just tried to rally through it, right? Just go through it. And I had laid down for a minute to take a nap, but he had called my mobile and I picked it up. He goes, you sound like you're sleeping. And right then I was like, oh shit, I got caught. Oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And I blurted out, I'm having a miscarriage. And he goes, okay, I'll talk to you later. Call me when you're ready. And I was like,
yep, we're going to button it up.
Oopsie, stepped into that landmine. And I thought to myself, I got mad at myself. Why did you make him uncomfortable? Why right? And it's like, are you kidding me? So all I really just want to say to anyone listening is, if you screw it up, it's better to stay with the person than to like hang up really quickly. Note to self, I learned in that moment what I really wanted and needed. I was that honest because I was embarrassed that he caught me sleeping. And then to be that transparent, to be told, well, then, you know, you go take care of yourself and just call me later. I didn't know, did that mean take a week off?
Right.
You know what I mean? Call me in an hour. There was nothing there to have that buffer around the relationship, and the trust wasn't there enough for me to know. So then I just stayed awake and felt anxious and didn't grieve. So, you know, I had to process that over time too. Right. And so I'm just bringing that up because that's what showed up when you were talking.
I mean, I want to just do a quick side comment of, well, I've never experienced a miscarriage. I've loved a lot of people who have. And that is something that's often kept in the shadows, and it's often dismissed. And so when we talk about like honoring human complexity, right, we have to understand that there are things happening in our lives that you couldn't leave it at the door. I mean, we can't, you know, I mean, this idea, this wish that people often have, and I'll hear it from leaders as like this badge of honor, like, well, we leave emotions out of it. I'm like, bullshit, you do. Those emotions are there. And, you know, because we can regulate our emotions. Like, we can work to regulate our emotions, but we can't remove them. And also what's always ironic to me is that the people who will say like, we just leave it out of there, always say it with so much anger, right? They always have so much emotion behind leaving emotions at the door. Well, you just got to leave it at the door, which we don't need emotions in here. But so one, I want to acknowledge, like, there's a lot of suffering that happens in the shadows.
Yes.
And like, and it's not to say that it's expected for team members to share, but we have to be prepared that they might.
Especially when you catch them sleeping.
And we have,
right?
And I think that, like, so, one of the practices that we're really passionate about helping people understand, and we challenge ourselves to try to show up in this way, is, in that moment, he was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know what to say, it is more powerful for you to say, I don't know how to show up for you right now, but I know I want to. Is more powerful than being like, oh, I need to run. Like, I gotta get out of here. That's too. So, so I want to take a moment, if it's okay, to like talk about ways that we're unintentionally dismissive towards people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Shows up in our conversations, right?
Yeah.
Because when we hear the word dismissive, we think of that as being malicious or like, oh, I'm shooting you down, right? That wasn't his intention. It was just his intention in that moment was he was so uncomfortable. I assume, I'm making an assumption, that it was like, oh, I'm going to step out of this, let her deal with it. Right?
Yeah, I really think he was like, I didn't expect this. I'm ill-equipped. I'm going to go regroup myself. Like he didn't say any of that, which I would have appreciated, right? But I didn't expect to say it. But I will say, lovely man. I loved working for him. He was not trying to be a jerk.
No.
But boy, did that, put this like elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Would our lives be easier if the humans we worked with were like machines that we could predict and control or whatever? Certainly, but they're not.
And I don't even know if that'd be easier.
I don't think it would be either. But I think people think that, right? Like,
absolutely. Listen, I'm in tech all day. AI and machine learning. Let's just
yeah.
And I used to be famous for saying, now, anyone listening, if there's children around, I'm going to just drop an F-bomb for you. But I used to go, I'm surrounded by fucking feelers. Like, God, make it stop today, right? And there's other days I'm like, I'm so grateful we're human. So it depended on my capacity too. But I was known for having the effing feelers. Myers-Briggs, I had lots of F's in my world. And I was like, what is up with the F's? But oh my gosh, the F's, they can see, feel, and hear things that are going on that you're in your brain not even paying attention to, and they help you regulate the system. So yes, let's go back to the dismissive part.
Yeah. So there's lots of beautiful ways that we can be unintentionally dismissive, right? So like with beautiful intentions, so a couple that come into mind. One is like the people who are like super positive, optimistic, right?
Yes.
So if I come to you and say, wow, I'm really struggling with this, and you say, wow, but Sarah, at least this, right? Like, let's look at the bright side of things. And while positivity is a really important perspective and can be a powerful reframe, it is not the solution to everything. And exactly like you shared, when he was like, oh, take care of that and I'll get back, you immediately, what I heard was like, felt some perhaps embarrassment, some shame, some like
responsibility,
anxiety, responsibility. What did I do? And so imagine I come to you and go, wow, today was just a really hard day. I'm exhausted by X, Y, and Z. And you go, you know what? Look at the bright side. At least you're busy. You're like, okay, now I feel like the jerk.
Yep.
Because I had a hard day. Other ways to show, well, you know what? That's a first world problem. I hear this a lot.
Oh, I hear that too. Yep.
And like, yeah, it is true. And it also, like, both things can be true. I can be having a hard day and it cannot be the same kind of hard that someone else is experiencing. And so like in our attempt, there was a psychologist, and I'll forget her name, but she talked about toxic positivity. Like she talked about it like ice cream. Right? Like ice cream is good sometimes. But when I'm not feeling ice cream and you keep trying to ram it down my throat over and over, I don't want ice cream right now. Right.
Yeah.
And the same is like offering perspectives, right? So, like, well, just think of it this way, right? It's kind of all in the same vein. So here's some strategies for those of us who are like the hyper optimistic and how we can shift through it. Right.
Yep.
Perspectives, your personal experiences and positivity should never be a prescription. It could be an invitation. So here's what this would look like. If you share with me that you're struggling, right? that maybe instead of like, well, you should, right? And we should on people, or just do this. I could say, I could ask you, would it be helpful for me to share what I've done when I've been in a similar situation, right? And then that gives you the option to say yes or no.
Yep.
Or to say, I don't know if this would help you, but something that's helped me is X. And I'm just putting it out there as a possibility instead of telling you you should do it.
Yep.
So that's one, and unintentionally dismissive, right, can also show up as like, just the shoulds, you should just, it's not that big of a deal, right? Like as somebody who's experienced panic disorder, having anyone tell me don't worry, I almost have to laugh at. I'm like, well, yeah, that's not helpful.
Yeah. My favorite is, why don't you just calm down? Come back.
Oh yeah, just calm down.
F you. Never. I saw a meme. Never in the world of calm down has anyone ever calmed down when they've been told to calm down. Something like this. Like
yeah.
No, I mean, as a parent, the first thing I say is, wow, you are really upset. Let's have a conversation.
Yes,
when you're ready.
And acknowledging it. Right. Yes. Right? Like, or like, it's really not that big of a deal.
Oh, right. You just want to slap somebody.
You, it's not.
Yeah.
But this person it is. And so and that's one of the things we have to understand. Like there are these beautiful ways of like, I want to remove this pain. I want to offer a perspective that actually unintentionally minimizes, dismisses, or shames people.
Yeah.
And so like the simple phrase that you just said, like, of just acknowledging what someone else is going through. I can acknowledge your frustration, your pain, your anger, and not agree with it.
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
Confuse that, right? Like, I don't have to have experienced it, or I don't have to agree with it. I can just, maybe there's a time where I go, I don't really think this is that big of a deal, but I can tell it is to her.
Yeah.
So then I can say something like, I can see how important this is to you.
Oh, I love that so much. Right? Yes.
I can sense this is weighing on your shoulders right now. Tell me more.
Yes. And, yes. Tell me more is such a beautiful gift. If everyone could write that down.
Right.
When you don't know what to say,
right,
you say, tell me more. And you just zip the lip. I say, zip the baggie or shut the door, close the door and just listen. Like, tell me more. What's really underneath all this? There's something here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So there's some strategies.
Yeah.
Right. Would you like me to, I heard you say, would you like me to share with you what's worked for me in situations like this? Or I'm not telling you what to do. Here's what's worked for me. The other one is, wow, this is really important to you. I can feel this, tell me more.
Yeah.
Or I can see this is impacting you. Let's have a conversation, whatever, like to be more invitational. And I love your shirt. So for anyone who's watching the video, chronically curious, like this is what we're talking about. Stay in the curiosity zone, not just get out of the way zone, right? Or remove yourself so you don't have to deal with it. Because one of the things I really, really believe, and I mean, I live in tech and I love working in tech. It's so amazing in so many ways. And I think the big blind spot in tech is tech skills do not make you a great leader of people or companies.
Yeah.
And I'll say it and people are looking at me like, well, okay, you go get your PhD and write this code and get this patent. And I'm like, no. You're amazing. What I'm trying to say is this human piece, which is what you guys work with, right? I'm going to read it again. The complexity of the humans they serve, there is no code.
No.
Right? There's no specific formula for that individual because what is going on for them is in their own unique experience and their own system of life.
Yeah.
So yes, you may have your PhD 3 times over. And if you can't have the conversation, you're not going to be leading or inspiring these people to do what you feel the company needs to do. So you got to get human.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, and we know, right? We know that like the best teams are ones where there's psychological safety.
Yes.
Right. Where they feel safe to be who they are. They feel they can bring their whole self to work.
Yep.
That they can take risks, that they can ask questions, that they can do all of this stuff. And there's things about the humans that is like somewhat beautifully technical. Like we know how the brain works under stress.
Yes.
We know how quickly the amygdala can trigger when it's under stress. It's 0.07 seconds or faster, right? Like we know what happens to different parts of the brain when the stress response happens. But like this is, I get really excited when this idea of the complexity of humans is there's no script. there's tools or toys, if you will. Somebody was like, don't have a toolbox, have a toy box so you can play in it.
Oh, I love it. I love bringing play to work. Yeah.
You know, but it's and the thing with like relationships is that literally we're constantly evolving, right? We're changing as people. We're changing because of our lived experiences. We're changing because of our cultures. We're changing because of our external factors. And even if you and I have a great relationship today, that doesn't mean that like we might not have challenges down the road. And so like and being able to, you know, I mean, that's the thing. And I don't know, I'm curious to, you know, with your experience working so heavily in tech, and while I've worked with some tech companies, I work with a lot of like finance and insurance, which is like also very analytical.
Oh, very much so.
Very heady, very right. Is that, where was I going with that? It's that like people can be pretty equipped to navigate task conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can fight about the process. We can have a disagreement about the coding. We can like step into that land together, right? Like we can do that. But where I see one of the biggest gaps consistently across every industry is that it's our ability to navigate relationship conflicts, our ability to navigate those relationships, right? We get the elephant in the room, right? Little Gail is back here always.
I love that you have an elephant, by the way. I just want to
yeah.
say, I love that you have an elephant in the room. I love it so much. Yes.
And that's the book that's coming out.
Oh, I can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Excellent. There's a teaser for all of you.
There's a teaser. Sometimes this summer, don't feed the elephants.
Don't feed the elephants. I love it. Yeah. Yes. So what I'm hearing you say is there is known coding. We know how the amygdala works. We actually know what happens, you know, in fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
We also know you
fawn or flock, right? There's a couple.
Oh, dude, right? You can also rise to the challenge, or you can tend and befriend, right? I mean, when you think about all the different ways you can leverage stress, because sometimes stress, you know, for high performance athletes on the Olympics, they channel that shit, right? Like, okay, great, but I don't want to be in an Olympic gold medal race every day. Right. Like I want to train for that, and I want to have one of them every 4 years. You know?
Well, and you know, and we also know that like if you have experienced any kind of trauma, right, like your brain is going to show up differently. And even if you want to rise to the occasion, you might not be able to because of all the rewiring that's happened.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things I'm hearing is when we work with the leaders that we work with, regardless of industry, by the way, and regardless of level too, and this is even if you're leading your own life, like understanding how your brain works is liberating as all hell.
That's a good way, right? It totally is.
That might be my quote for the day. Understanding how your brain works could be liberating as all hell. Totally. Because it's going to make more sense. You want to work on code, go look at your brain and figure out how that works. And, you know, there's plenty of research out there, and I'm consistently learning and growing myself because, boy, what an eye opener that all is. And then what can you do for that? So I'll show you one of my little tricks. Like when I'm feeling stressed out, I have my essential oil. See if I
love it. Yeah.
It's called Brave. There we go. Brave. Right?
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guess what? It's very orange and it's courage blend. So if I have that big keynote speech or that big sales proposal or whatever, I'm like, you know what I'm doing? Right. I'm helping myself. You know, I'm rubbing it and I'm like, okay, now I'm back in my body. Okay. Where am I? Right. So there's all these, and I'm not promoting this by any means. I'm trying to give an example on my desk. Right. There's so many different ways to get back into center, to be present and open and have the capacity to say, this is really important to you. I can tell. Let's talk more about it. Yeah. You know,
we have so much, you know, it's like we underestimate our ability to sit in discomfort. You know, like, it's like, I think that sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit of being able to sit with that. And again, you know, I love the when you understand your brain, it's liberating. It is. I mean, it's when, you know, when I was diagnosed with panic disorder, you know, imagine your life is speaking in front of people and never knowing at any moment you're going to have a panic attack. And that's where I got introduced to understanding about my amygdala, which is why I have shirts made that say, I heart my amygdala, right?
Right. Yeah.
And when you understand that, like, oh, there's like a life cycle of those chemicals and hormones, and those last for about 24 hours. And right. And then it's like, okay, like I can sit with these in a different way now. And also I can, not only is it liberating for me because, and it doesn't remove the discomfort. It doesn't mean that I can remove the stress, but it does mean I can recover more quickly. Yeah. And I can also show up and give space to help somebody else navigate it and help them recover more quickly. And, you know, and it's amazing. Yeah, like it's always, I believe that anyone who's put in a position of authority needs to have like fundamental psychology and fundamental just like physiology and neurology of just like understand the people, because there's so much unnecessary stress because we just don't understand that.
Yeah.
And then that means we don't know how to navigate it, and we don't know how to show up more powerfully, because you know, with relationships, it's not a question of if it's going to have a regrettable moment, it's when.
Yeah, totally.
It's
yeah.
when.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. I'm looking for my favorite book on this. I don't know if I have it on my desk. Dr. Danny Friedland is amazing. Do you know Danny Friedland?
I'm not familiar with him.
Oh my gosh, I'll send it to you. So I'll just put a real quick plug for him if I can.
Yeah.
I send it to every client when they start coaching with me, and I will find it. I'll put it in the show notes for sure. But he basically talks about stress is an indicator that you care, right? Emotions are an indicator, just like you said, tears are an indicator that you care. And he goes through all the brain science and then how to go from reactive to innovative and creative, and the mindset you have to have in the 3 steps you need to take. So that's not today. But I want to highlight that for people if they're looking for something. For me, his work was what really opened my eyes to some of this, like, oh my gosh. I definitely did the whole brain child when I became a parent. I looked at all that, and my daughter knows her amygdala very well. Right. We talk to her amygdala when there's moments, right?
I love it. I love it.
And so that helped too. So becoming a parent and also having my own burnout process and reboot was what got me to really get curious about my brain and my reactions. And so, yeah, do you have a favorite resource for people in that space when you think about it?
Yeah, I love Dr. Bruce Perry's work. He comes from the world of trauma, and he put out a lot of really beautiful short videos right as the pandemic was hitting. I mean, he has a lot of content, but yeah, I mean, it just exploring and also the relationship between stress and our resiliency.
Yes.
And like an understanding that, for people to understand that if the other person is dysregulated, if they're in a triggered response, if I come in it with a triggered response, it's almost impossible, unlikely for us to calm each other down. We're only going to keep ramping each other up, which is why it's so important, right? As leaders, that we can develop deep self-awareness. Don't assume you have it. Because that's one of my, I feel like this is
You're wearing a t-shirt that says I'm self-aware, and people are going, yeah, right.
Like, oh, no, Sarah, I'm self-aware. Like, really? Like, in what areas? And then they kind of pause, and it's like, I work really hard at my self-awareness, and I know that I only understand a small percentage, and there's always going to be more. So like really working on that self-awareness, right? Being able to regulate, understand what do you need to regulate yourself, understand what triggers you. It's things like, even like that, when we get frustrated or upset with somebody, we tend to focus our anger on them.
Yeah.
Instead of taking it back to us and go, what's my, anytime we're frustrated, usually it's because we have a need that's not being met.
Yeah.
We haven't thought about it like that. So we're just irritated with the other person instead of asking ourselves, what's the need I have right now that's not being met? What's the value of mine that's being stepped on or not being honored right now? And that's part of like when we work with people through like not feeding the elephant, that's like the first step is we have to get curious with ourselves.
I love that. I wrote, that's a writer downer. I wrote, what's the need not being met or the value being stomped on? A lot of times with clients I've talked about, it sounds like a core value conflict.
Yeah.
And that's the words I use, but I never thought about it about the need. So this is new for me. I'm processing it real time as you said it. Yeah. What's the need, right? Because I always think about how do I want to feel? And really feelings are driven by needs and wants. And so, I'm going to unpack this one probably for weeks now. This is really helpful. Yeah.
Well, and so often we either haven't taken time to think about that, or honestly, like we didn't know how to. I feel like I'm still learning how to listen in those moments where I'm really heated. Well, here's a good example of that. I was working with a client, and there was some conflict between he and his colleagues. So he's the executive and a COO, and he said, it's really difficult when he's disagreeing with me all the time. And he's like, and I'm struggling with that. Like, I know we are working on him speaking up more, but I'm actually struggling with it. And so I just wanted to get curious, like in what situations, like, are there specific situations where that is harder for you when he disagrees than others? And he thought about it and he goes, yeah, when we're dealing with what should we do with people in the office related to the pandemic.
Yep.
And now earlier in the conversation, when we were just chatting, he expressed how hard it's been of like, am I doing the right thing? I don't, I want to keep people safe, but we're also a company that's in the office. And how do we, so like I knew he was wrestling with this doubt. And so I asked him, I said, in those moments when you're wrestling with these decisions, what's the need you have that's not being met, right, by your counterpart in these moments? And you could tell it was like a new, like he never considered that, right? Because our brain doesn't. It wants to focus on the target of my frustration. And I'm not immune to that either.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need someone else to be like, okay, let's bring it back to you, Sarah. Like, but I don't want to.
You just want to hand everybody a card you can hold up and go, what's your need not being met?
Right.
We might have a new product line coming out, folks. I don't know.
Yeah. Here's my value being stepped on. Here's our value conflict. But he after some reflecting, he was like, I just want to know that I'm a good leader in that moment.
Yep. Right.
That was the need that wasn't being met. So if I would have just stayed on like, well, you're struggling with that, so let's see how we can get him to not disagree in the same way, we would have missed the opportunity to go deeper.
That's beautiful.
And I'm sure you have countless stories about that.
Oh my gosh, I could smile at these. No. The reason I'm smiling is, I tend to tell my own personal stories, but yes, that happens all the time. And I'm going to borrow I am now wiser for this conversation, right? What is the need?
As well.
I'm a words of affirmation love language gal. And there were times when I would ask questions in meetings because I wanted affirmation. And they'd give it to me straight, right? And I was like, what? So I had one, it's a very long story. I've written about it multiple times, but I think it's a very important, if you know what your love language is, for me, that was really helpful, right? So if words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, physical touch, which at work is like a handshake, high five, whatever, or presence in the office together. Can't remember the fifth one. It'll come to me. But words of affirmation are everything for me. And so when I wasn't getting the words of affirmation about the good job, like you can tell that my other story, the colleague, the sponsor that cried, that's a word of affirmation. I got that like, loud and clear. And so, I go in this meeting I'm running and I ask everybody, isn't it going great? Because I want the affirmation. And they're like, actually, no, this part sucks. And this is broken. I was like, what? What the hell did I just do? But we circled back. Like I called it. I recognized it in myself in that moment, circled back. And, it was a wonderful learning opportunity for all of us. And it really did build safety. But that was painful as shit, man. I'm like, can't you all just blow some smoke and tell me it's great? Cause I need this. I will do it, right?
Like, I need to hit.
What's my need?
I mean, and what if people, right? Like, and like, no wonder there's so many like conflicts and disagreements and all of that is because, you have your needs and I have my needs, and maybe my need is efficiency. And you're like, Lisa, which it isn't, but like, let's say it is like, God, if she keeps asking about how things are going, right?
Yes.
And like, I mean, that's one of the things that I feel like kind of circling around to relationships and conversations is, as we think about these needs, like they're in conflict most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Our styles are in conflict, like often, I mean, Dr. John Gottman, right, who's one of my favorite researchers on marriage and relationships. I mean, what his research shows is when it comes to marriages, but I feel like it shows up in the work same way. It's like almost 70% of all issues in relationships are perpetual. Perpetual meaning it's just it's the difference of who we are, of what we value, of what our experiences are. And so if we aren't able to show up in those moments, we're screwed because we're going to keep having those moments. Yes. Right. So then what happens is we attack it, we avoid it, we get resentful, we get into the land of violent politeness, right? Like that's, like, I'm going to smile at you, but I'm going to see the behind my teeth, and
my favorite when I'd get there is help me understand. And then the ... is why you're such an idiot. Right? But I would just smile and go, help me understand how we did this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Violent politeness.
I got that one down. Yeah. Right.
It's I mean, here's an analogy that I like. I love that I got from two coaches, David Darst and Cindy Darst. And it's this idea of like, think of our relationships like islands, right? I have my island. I have my island where my values live supreme, where my preferences live supreme, where my needs are. You have your island. And what happens is we try to make it a tug of war of like, how do I get you to my island? How do you get me? Instead of taking the time to go, well, what's our island together? Right. And we even did that a little bit before jumping on this call. I mean, people don't realize is we took some time to go, you were like, hey, just so you know, sometimes I might swear. And like, that was us building our island together. And I was like, yep, I'm comfortable with that.
Yep.
Or like, hey, we're just going to have this be organic. Like, we built our island together intentionally, which is why this has been such a great conversation.
There's a high five, virtual high five for us. Yeah. So I want to circle back on this for people because, oh my gosh. And I told Sarah, I'm like, we could do this for 7 days. So we've gone all around. We started with what are you seeing in the world today, right? And then we talked about what's going on in the different minds of leaders. And the pull through here has been the grief and trauma and relationships and the humanness, right, of the people in our environments. And we've given some great examples. We shared some stories. And what's coming up for me right now that I think is like a really great place for some specifics for us is when people are not on the same island. Like the CEO says, we're an in-person office, and all the leaders are like, hell no, man, we need flexible. We need this. The HR people are like, I don't want to change one more freaking thing. I'm exhausted from contact tracing. I'm exhausted from layoffs. I have my own stuff. I'm homeschooling my kids, or somebody in my family died, and now you want me to change a bereavement policy? Are you out of your freaking mind? And yet your point on the bereavement policy, I think, is worth a double click. Yeah. So you look at, the competing things that are going on in all areas for leaders, whatever level, and whether it's just leading in their own life or leading in an organization. I guess I don't really know what my question is, but I feel like we might want to just popcorn a couple of really specific, tangible things that they could start with. I almost want to say, how might we navigate this? How might they open a conversation or prepare or even get clear on what's really important right now? So I don't know if that's a real good question or not, but that's what's showing up for me. Okay.
Again, there's never one solution. Right? There's never one path. I mean, the one thing I will say is that if you are the person who's in a position of power and you have the most power in the room, you have to understand that how you show up is what's going to dictate whether that's a powerful conversation or not.
Okay, say it again, because that's a mic dropper. Yep.
If you have the biggest title, if you have the most authority, the culture, it's not solely that, but how you receive those conversations, how you contribute to, how you nurture is what's going to dictate how well that conversation goes. And because feedback doesn't matter how good I am at giving it, if you don't know how to receive it, it's a waste of time, right? So it's really, and I say this lovingly, because so often when I'm working with executives, they will say things like, but Sarah, I'm just Mary, or I'm just, right? Like, I'm just, I'm just Jack. Like, you're not just Jack. You're the CEO, you're the CFO, which means you have formal authority and power. And if you are not clear about that, and you are not, or clear about how you might misuse it, because let's be real, right? Like, that happens, not always consciously, but that happens. Some people are struggling with virtual because there's no corner office on the Zoom screen. They might not admit it, but I've seen it where there's a little bit of a like, I've lost some identity of being the person in power. Anyway, that's another conversation. But understand that if you have the most power in the room, how you show up in that conversation is going to absolutely influence and set the tone. So that's one thing.
Yep.
But I and I love your language of like, just how might we? Because like sometimes we get caught into, we jump to execution. Like we move from possibilities to execution right away. And it's just like, how might we? I wanted to like re-anchor on what your suggestion was. And there's also like some practices, right? Like spending time just asking questions. Like when we're needing to be innovative, it's just like, let's just take 5-10 minutes and we're just going to ask questions. We're not answering them. We're just going to throw down how many questions we can, ask around this situation. I like asking questions about, what might we gain? What might we lose, right? What would be possible if? The other thing is naming the competing commitments, right? You call them value conflicts. I call them competing commitments. It's like, so we say that we are a company that, this is a common one. We say we're a company that's like a family.
People are our most important resource. That's my
People
favorite.
are our most important resource.
That's such a line of shit in so many cases.
Good intention. Good intention.
Well intended.
Let's be real. Good intentions does not absolve you from negative impact. So so good intentions. And so then where are we actually in conflict with that? What are the things we're doing or not doing that's actually getting in the way of us being able to do that? And that requires some courage, because it's real easy for us to stay comfortable. We call them comfortable interpretations versus courageous interpretations.
Oh, I love that so much.
Courageous interpretations require us to see, where are we showing up in a way that's actually not in alignment with what we say is important? Because for me, I could give two shits what's on your wall. Like, I don't care what values are on your wall. Like, I'm interested in what words and actions are happening in your hall, right? Like, I want to know, and I want to know what kind of conversations are happening where we're reflecting on, when are we missing the mark? And, you know, and even to like acknowledge, like to your point with the HR person, is like, if you make me change one more policy. Like, you know, what support do we need to make it easier for you? Right? Like, how can we help? There's a simple, I actually think we're going to, I don't know when this will air, but I think we're going to do just a public free webinar on this, because I think that a lot of people now, either organizationally or just personally, are in this time of reflection of, what did I learn from this time? What do I want to hold on to? What do I want to let go of? So there's a really simple, I learned this, forever ago, and I don't know where this comes from. So if somebody knows, do we have time? Can I share?
We're going for it. Absolutely.
Okay.
We're adding value.
So think about any kind of situation where there's change, or you're navigating a change. And if you think of it like a quadrant axis, right? So on one side of the quadrant, you have things we have, and then things we don't have. Right? So it would look like this, right? Don't have. And then at the top, we have things we want and things we don't want. Right? And so things we have that we already have and we want, like we want that to continue, we call those treasures. Like, those are the things we want to hold on to because they're important. So like right now, for me personally, I love that I get to collaborate with my husband. Because he's my video producer. And so when I think about what the world looks like post this, I want to keep working with him. And so that's a treasure. There are things we don't have and we want. Those are wishes. There are things we have, but we don't want. Call that trash. Get rid of it. And then there are things we don't have, don't want. Those are our fears. And so it looks something like this, right?
Oh, I love it. Yep.
And so we can use this as a conversation tool, informally or formally, to say, hey, we're in a time of, now again, this is where I'm saying, going back to the person in position of power, because if the person in position of power is saying, no, we're just going to do it my way, then this doesn't matter. We can't even have the conversation. But if we're having dialogue around, what does our world look like next? What do we want the next chapter? Because we all know it's not going back to normal. It's whatever we're going to create. What would it look like to do a brainstorm to say, hey, what do we currently have in our culture that we want to make sure we hold on to? What do we not have that we do want? What do we have? And we're like, that's got to go, right? Working overtime, working, but when we were talking about your chief of staff starting, you're like, I can't wait to not be working at midnight. That's a trash. That baby's got to go.
See ya. Yeah.
And then fears, right? And what's beautiful about it is that when you take this time to talk about it as a group, it can visually highlight those value conflicts you were talking about, those competing commitments we were talking about.
Love it.
And we have to understand that there's no quick solution to those, right? There's no quick win if we have a value conflict. There's no quick win if we have competing commitments, but it opens up the conversation for us to dance in the complexity more.
Oh my gosh, to dance in the complexity, which is, in the world I live in every day. And to have a friend, hey, note to everyone listening who's in the engineering land, right? Here's a formula for you. Here's a framework. Here's a model.
Yes.
Right? Have, don't have, want, don't want. We have treasures, trash, wishes, and I missed one.
Fears.
Yes. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Our fear is that if we stay remote, we won't have good relationships.
Yeah.
Our fear is that if we stay remote, that the people who stay remote who aren't in the office won't have as many opportunities. So once we identify that, then we can go, so what are we going to do about it?
Exactly.
Right? Like this is how we can get that strategy behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is awesome. I love that we landed there on this, right? Talk about, in the show notes, we'll be like, wait till the end, you'll get a great model, right?
You know what? I'll create a handout. We can attach it.
Oh, I love it. Right. So cool. Yeah. And I'll add something too for those folks. So we were talking about, I'm so self-aware. I've got the t-shirt, right? One of the most amazing exercises I learned when I was going through Gallup, working in the strengths land, is they have an exercise called the best of me. Like you get the best of me when, you get the worst of me when, and usually it's the opposite, right? Here's what you can count on me to. And then here's what I need from you. And so those 4 questions and your model right here, I'm like, that is gold for people. So we are going to, land on 2 different ways to look at navigating and creating the conversations, because you get the best of me when, here's what you can count on me for, here's what I need from you, and here's where you're not going to get the best of me. You know what? You're not going to get the best of me when I'm dealing with grief and the bereavement policy doesn't let me mourn. You're not going to get the best of me, right? When I feel like you're going to force me back in the office and we are not vaccinated and I still have kids at home that, need their parents. That's a whole different conversation than you'll get the worst of me when I get a surprise action item. Right. So you have to like courageously step into,
you have to go deeper.
The situations that could potentially cause you to not be at your best. So, surface.
Let's take it full circle, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we can work on not being dismissive. Well, that's not really that big of a deal. You just send them to daycare.
Right.
Like, oh, we just squash that baby. And you're like, well, I guess I can't disagree here. I guess I'm not really psychologically safe. Well, I guess that I can't show up as my whole self. Right. It's that, it's that willingness to just like, if I were to like boil down in a really simple way, like, right, like navigating is just like us getting really clear about what makes sense to us and also making sure we're really clear about what makes sense to the other person.
Yes. Yeah. And I go back to your shirt. Honest to God. And when we started, we were before, the green room, we'll call it, right? I was like, this shirt is amazing. Chronically curious, right? And that's why I've really landed on the how might we or how might I. It just opens up curiosity and it opens up possibilities and potentials. That how do we is a totally different question.
It's and exactly. And for us, right, this idea of like real pure curiosity, not like you're joking and being so beautiful like, about your own honesty about like, help me understand. I don't want to understand.
I want you to stop it.
Like we can't be, I mean, if we're not ready to be curious, we shouldn't have the conversation. That's my that's one of my rules. But like, but to understand that there's always unknown. There's always unknown. There's always possibilities. And I would argue that being curious is one of the most compassionate and kind things we can do for ourselves and other people. So like for us, our foundation, right? So the chronically curious leader is, honor human complexity, seek self-awareness, embrace experimentation, listen to learn, and speak and stand with courage.
And there it is.
That's it.
I mean, amen. Hallelujah. Like, I don't even,
the best leaders.
I really need like a mic I can drop when these kind of moments happen, because it's so good, Sarah. That's so good. And here's what I know. And we started off with this. People are busy, one conversation at a time. I want to make sure that as listeners are, we're wrapping this up. I firmly believe there is enough time. I believe it's about making the time. And I also know that if you're in the middle of getting ready for a quarterly business review or a board presentation, and someone comes to you and is like, we need to revisit the bereavement policy, timing sucks, but you have an opportunity there to say, that sounds really like something that's going to require my full attention. And right now I'm here. This matters. Let's talk about it here. Right. And schedule the time. You don't have to be hostage to the emotions that show up. You actually own your schedule. And it's in those moments where the psychological trust is actually built, because you're acknowledging this is so important. I want to give you all of me. And right now I have this deadline. That doesn't mean what you're saying isn't important. It just means that I don't want to do a disservice to you and not be fully present while this is happening. Right. And you don't go 3 weeks, you got to figure it out. But I think the moment of power, and you can tell me your thoughts on this too, as we wrap this up, right? Because so many leaders are like, I just don't have time. I don't have time. And what if it takes a lot? I mean, I've had an employee who I ended up having to help get 5150'd, right? Like literally was suicidal. Do you think I had time for a suicidal employee? Hell no. but I
Yeah.
figured it out. Right. And we
Yes.
navigated it, and she's amazing.
Yeah.
This is like 15 years ago, but at that time, I didn't have time for that, but I had to figure out what mattered.
Well, I also, and this is going to be a conversation for another day, we have to rethink efficiency.
Yes.
Because you think you don't have time, but the reality is that if you are able to build high trusting relationships, if you're able to communicate clearly, if you're able to get curious with each other, if you're able to navigate those conflicts effectively, because it's not if, it's when, you're going to be more effective. You're going to be more efficient. And so it's like, whenever I hear that, like, well, we just don't have time for that, I call BS on that.
Yeah,
because
totally.
actually the most effective teams are the ones who can navigate that. And the other thing is, understand that every single moment you're making impact. Every single moment you are building, you are sustaining, or you are decreasing trust. There's never a neutral, never a neutral. And that person is doing the same thing. And so when I hear I never have time, the thing that I just want to like invite people in is, these don't have to be 60-minute conversations.
Exactly.
Have to be, now in your situation, when you're dealing with somebody suicidal, that's a very different, right? That's a very different space and time. But like, it's just moments. When are the moments when I can acknowledge your humanity? When are the moments when I can speak and stand with courage and say, this is important to me too. I know that I can't give you my attention. That moment of showing up like that sends a really beautiful message. Since it's connect, we're co-creating, we're collaborating, but we're also setting some expectations. And so whenever I hear, like, because I hear it too, well, I don't have time for that. Like, the cost of you not being intentional in those moments, it, like, in the short term, you think you're saving time, but you're not in the long term.
Yeah.
Like, I promise, I've seen it.
Yeah. It's like fast food versus a homemade meal,
Right.
The preservatives, the salt and the butter that's going into the fast food and the oil is nothing like
the
nutrients of actually slowing down to make that meal. Right. And what happens then? Yeah. Then I don't have time. I'm guilty of it myself. I've had moments as well, but I know that if you don't have time to not have time, like the cost, right? You don't have the budget. And then I go back to do you really understand what your role is?
Right. Because it, like, I mean,
are you the efficiency process person, or are you a people leader? Let's get really clear, right?
And it's not an either or.
Exactly.
Like, they can be together.
Yes,
and
you can do both.
Great relationships are way more efficient than ones that you're having to like navigate all the time. And if you don't care enough to want to develop relationships with your team members to create that safe space, then I would argue you shouldn't be in a leadership position.
Yep. I would argue that with you.
Yeah, you'll never be as successful. You just you might be okay, functional, but we don't want functional. We don't want
functional. Yeah, the world doesn't need functional right now, people.
No, we got a lot of that.
We need some love. We need some light. We need some safety. We need some laughter, right? We
also need space for disagreements, and we need to understand that, right? Like, harmony. My friend Stephanie Chin sent me this message about harmony, because often we work with teams where, like, strengths finders, like, oh, we have this high value of harmony. And it's like, well, when you think about harmony isn't about maintaining the peace. If you think of harmonies in a song, it's about different voices that are coming together to create this beautiful thing. Like, we need to disagree. We need to push. We need to be able to speak up.
Yep. Especially if you're in an innovative space. Let me tell you something. If you're all in alignment, you are not innovating.
Right.
It's like that. You might be a redneck.
You're real comfortable. You're real comfortable.
Yeah. That whole, what is that comedian's name?
Oh, Jeff Fox.
Jeff Foxworthy. You might be a redneck, right? You might not be innovative.
You might not be an innovator if you constantly respond to things with, we've tried that before.
Yeah.
You might not be an innovative team if you spend 20 more times, focusing on how it won't work than how it might work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay.
Sorry, I got one more. Okay, hold on. One more.
Yeah.
You might not be an innovative team if you say but more than yes and.
Oh, right.
That's it. Okay. Now
you got your new blog post, your top 10. You might be.
My comedic set list.
I love it. So here's what I want people to know. So 2 things. Number 1, I'm building a playlist, because one thing I know for sure when it comes to energy, and what I've learned in my life here, is that when I'm vibrating at a low energy, I'm not as productive, innovative. I'm also not open to the conversations that need to happen. So I'm always looking for ways to raise my vibe, right? So I'd love to know your go-to song to raise your vibe. What's a song that you turn that on and it just shifts for you, and you're more open, expansive, and you're smile? Well, I see the smile, so there might be a song already known.
I mean, there's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
But the one that came to mind was I'm walking on sunshine.
Oh, walking on sunshine. Oh my gosh.
I can't help but dance.
Walking on sunshine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'm already bobbing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So like if you're going to have those tough conversations, you put your song on, right? So we're going to have a playlist and yours is going in there. And I love this so much. It even goes with your brand. When I look at all of your graphics and everything, you are sunshine. Like you bring sunshine into the room. And now you're walking on it. It's awesome.
Lisa,
I'm serious.
I have to thank you for that. One of my personal missions is I want to be the sun that nurtures the acorn to become the great oak tree it was meant to be.
Oh,
Because I think we all have greatness within us and we just sometimes need to be nurtured. So I'm really grateful for that.
yeah, you're doing it.
I didn't know, like I'm getting a little teary-eyed when you said
Oh,
that.
I love it. Well, you're doing it. I'm telling you, I stalked you on LinkedIn for this. I saw the sunshine. I saw what you do. So everybody, you want to go to LinkedIn for sure. You want to go either follow or connect, whatever works for you. But Sarah, how else can people connect with you? And I mean, you have YouTube channels and all kinds of stuff. So drop it all. Let's make sure everybody.
Yeah, Twitter is
awesomeness.
probably the place where I'm like most active. I mean, we're active on all channels on LinkedIn. If you send me a LinkedIn message, just know it takes me a little bit as Lisa learned, but sometimes it gets lost a bit. So I try that. Or you can connect with me directly at sarahnollwilson.com. Our website is www.sarahnollwilson.com.
I love it. I can't wait. I can't wait. Yes, our people need you. You're right. The world needs you. And I can't wait for all these acorns to grow. And thank you for your time and your energy today and your transparency and your stories. Everybody listening, you would just love the comments to, roll in on what really worked and what aha moments you had. And just know that you matter and you are navigating a lot right now and you're loved. Like there's so much here to unpack and the complexity of the humanness and the one conversation at a time is where the magic happens. And being chronically curious I will leave you with that thought today. How can you be chronically curious? As I will too. Yeah. And thank you, Sarah, for your time.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
That was great content, but let's be honest. If you don't get the support you need and start making changes in your life and work as a leader in tech, you can expect regret and burnout in the near future. Lisa can help you get kick-ass results at work without burning out so you can be present for the moments that matter to you and your loved ones. Take your first step at rebootwithlisa.com.